Hey everyone, it's Daphne from Scrap and Create, and we are working on page 4 and 5, and these are going to be mirror images of each other, so I'm going to construct them side by side. And we've got a couple of features. We're going to do a small waterfall feature on the outside of the page, and then we're going to do the flip-pop mechanism toward the spine of the book. And I'm going to give you these measurements. So you're going to start with 2 of these mats, which are going to hold this pop-up together. And these are 5.5 by 7.5, and they're just 2 flat mats. So you're going to have a top and a bottom. And then you're going to have 2 of the pop-up mechanisms, which are 8.5 by 5.5. 8.5 by 5.5. On the 8.5 inch side, you're going to score a 1/2 inch. And let me double check. 4.5. Wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. 4.25. Yeah. So a 1/2 inch, 4.25, and 8. 1/2 inch, 4.25, and 8. And I'm glad I double checked because I wrote it on the cut list wrong. And I'm going to fix that right now. 1/4. Okay. So basically what happens is you're going to turn these 2 tabs in, and then you're going to fold it in half, and you're going to have 2 of these. And you're going to put the 2 taped ends together. I'm going to set one of these aside, and they're going to go on top of this like so. Okay? So they're going to get installed just like so. So I'm going to turn this around so I can see both sides, and we'll go ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this scored edge toward the edge of the mat. I'm going to take off the tape, start to take off the tape actually, but not take it off until I get it centered. So I'm just going to fold that tab around. So once I start to press it into place, I can just pull it like a zipper. And I'm just lining up these corners with these corners. And I'm going to hold it flat, pull the tape backing off, and that's it. So now we're going to repeat that process on this side. Now, it should fit on here perfectly, but you want to make sure that you're giving enough room so that these can completely collapse. So make sure when you're pushing it into place and trying to square off your corners that you're not overlapping these flaps. And if you are, then you really need to retrim this paper and make sure that it's wide enough to accommodate both without there being any overlap of these hinges. Okay, now I just dry fit it to make sure that was going to work for me, and it did. And I've got the clearance I need. Okay, now I'm going to pull this tab off, pressing into place as I go. Okay, there we go. So now this is what it should look like. So there's your bottom piece. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the second mat and close it. So when we're done, it will look like this. So I'm going to adhere these 2 taped edges to this. This is a little bit more challenging because these want to pop up on me. So I'm actually going to tape this down with some removable tape. So it's just going to hold it in place so these aren't fighting me while I try to lay the top down. Now, if you can manage this just by holding it down, that's great too. Okay, I'm going to do some on the other side too. And this is just because I need more hands than I have. But if you can manage it without using temporary tape, that's fine. All the better. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is the same thing. We're going to pull off part of the tape. I'm going to lay this down on the edge like so, and then I'm going to press these two flaps down, and then I'm going to pull that tag off. Okay, that's starting to grab. Everything's lining up beautifully. So now I'm just going to pull that tape out. There we go. And now we're going to, and you can see that's starting to come together. We're going to repeat that process on this side. Okay. Okay, perfect. There we go. Now we're going to remove all of our temporary tape. And I will show you the function. And we're going to repeat this on page 5. So I'm going to save this tape so that I can do the same thing on page 5. And this is washi tape. I was for a moment I couldn't remember what it was called, but any temporary tape will do, or removable tape. Okay, so now it's going to open like so, and then it flips on the other side as well. Now for the installation on page 4, we're actually going to have it go horizontally. And this is 7.5. So we're going to come down a 1/4 inch, or actually I'm going to find the center of both, the center of this and the center of this, and that's how I'm going to place it. So we know the center of this is going to be 4 because it's 8 inches. And I need to make sure I'm doing that right side up. I am. So there's my center at 4. And this is 7.5. So I'm actually going to go this way. And there's my center at 3 3/4. So 3 3/4. Okay. Now that makes it easy. All I have to do is line up these 2 tick marks and we'll be set. Now before I lay this down, I want to think about the placement for just a second, because I have 2 options. This is going to be the waterfall that's next to it. I can place this toward the spine, and I think because it's going to be kind of bulky, I'm going to actually opt to put it on the outside edge. So even though I put my tick mark there, I'm going to go ahead and remark it on this side at 4, and then it'll be on the outside away from the spine. I think it might just be a little bit too bulky, and we might have trouble with it catching in the hinge area. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to place it here, and then the waterfall is going to be on the spine side. Okay, so what I'm going to do, because we have a front and a back, what I'm going to do is I am going to adhere 3 of the 4 sides, and I'm going to leave this open so I have a tuck spot here. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to tuck something in that pocket, and that's what's going to hold this waterfall feature in place. So here we go. That looks good. So I'm trying to decide, do I want tape or glue? I think I want glue. So I'm just going to put glue on 3 of the 4 sides so that we have a tuck spot behind it. And you could have put a gusset around the edge, but I think it's going to be a thick enough feature that I don't really want to add any more bulk. So that's my line of thinking. And I am just lining up the center dot with the center dot. Okay, that's in. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is figure out how we're going to keep all of this intact. And I need to think about that. Last time I did this, I wound up doing some complicated magnet placement. So I'm going to think about what I'm doing here. And the challenge is with this flap, you've got a layer here, a layer here, a layer here. And then you're going to double all those up with cardstock. So I think we can't do without 3 magnets. So that's what I'm planning on doing. I'm going to do 3 magnets. I'm going to start with the bottom layer. And I'm going to show this to you after I get it taped in place so you can see what I'm doing. Let's see, where's my scissors here? All right. So I've got a magnet here, and then I'm going to place a magnet here, and then we're going to use one more on top. Okay, and then we're going to put one more on this flap. And that should do it. It's a lot of magnets, but it's also holding down a lot of paper, so I wouldn't skimp. The other option here, and I just didn't happen to have any matching ribbon, but the other option would be to tuck a ribbon underneath this and then tie a bow to hold everything in place. Okay, there we go. Now I almost always put tape on top of my magnets, and I'm not going to this time. And the reason I'm not going to is because there's so much paper. Adding yet another layer of tape on top of it, I think just is going to break down the attraction to the magnet. So I'm going to go with just putting paper on top of the magnets. And I'm just going to repeat the process. Okay, slow process, I know. And then one more magnet. Okay, so let's turn everything right side up again. There's our flip pop, goes up one way and then the other way, so you can see where the magnets are. Okay, hopefully that made sense. Now, before we add our waterfall feature, we're going to go ahead and pull in page 5 and just repeat what we did while it's still fresh in our minds. Okay, so again, you're going to start with two mats, which are 5.5 by 7.5, and then you're going to add these flip mechanisms, and these are 8.5 by 5.5. 8.5 by 5.5. Score 1/2 inch, 4 1/4, and 8. 1/2 inch, 4 1/4, and 8. You're going to do that 2 times, and then these are going to get laid down just like so. Okay, I'm dry fitting to see that they're the right height as I'm laying it on, just to make sure that this mat is the right height. And I'm going to take a tab out just like we did. We're going to line these two corners up with these two corners, and then we're going to press it into place and pull our tab. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing on this side. Before I take anything off, I want to make sure it's going to fit on that mat without interfering with this hinge over here, and it's not. So we are good to go. Just need to pull back the tab so we can basically pull on it just like a zipper. Just lining up the score line with the edge of the mat. And everything is working out just fine. I'm going to pull on that tab as I come across, just pressing it all into place. There we go. There we go. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to use this temporary tape to kind of hold it in place because I just don't have enough hands while I add the top layer. And we're going to do the same thing. Now, if you weren't going to use it as a tuck spot behind it, you could apply this directly to your pocket page. But I definitely want a tuck spot to hold my waterfall in place. And that saves us from having to use magnets on the waterfall. So it's kind of trying to offset how many magnets we're using on this feature by not using any on the waterfall. Whoops. Start that again. Okay, now we're going to do that one more time. I just did not want to let go. Okay, easy peasy. It's kind of an interesting process to put together, but I think it's very impressive in the book. It's a lot of fun. Okay, we're going to do the same thing where we are going to find the center and then the center on the pocket page. And it's going to go to the outside, so we're going to put our dot on this side. We're going to mark it at 4. And then this gets marked at 3 1/4. Oh, sorry, 3 3/4. 3 3/4, not 3 1/4. Okay, and then we're going to do these 3 sides so that we have a tuck spot over here. Okay. Okay, that's in. Now before we add our waterfall features, there's going to be 4 on each one. And these are 4 1/2 by 4, 4 1/2 by 4, and you're going to score a 1/2 inch on the 4 1/2 inch side. And before we apply these, there's one for each page, or one set for each page. I'm gonna go here. We're gonna apply our designer paper because these are gonna sit right on top. So I'm gonna take a break here, get the designer paper lined up. We'll get that applied, and then we can start to add our waterfall. I'll be right back. Oops, I forgot. We haven't done our magnets yet on this side, so we'll do that before I take a break. Sorry about that. That's my dog. She's busy. So. All right. There. There, and then our last one is going to go on top. And then we're going to flip it over and do the same thing, other direction. And if you have larger magnets, you might be able to get away with 2, but I would test it. And the way I would test it is I would start with a magnet on the top and the bottom. Then I would make sure to add an extra piece of paper, just a buffer between each location. And remember, down here you would have one on each side, and then close it, just holding the paper in place to see if there's enough attraction to actually hold the 2 magnets. If you have a larger size magnet together. I don't. I do, but they're really thick, so they're not a good application here inside the book. Okay, now I'm gonna turn it over. We're gonna do the same thing. We need a total of 3 magnets. And that's 4. There we go. And again, I almost always cover my magnets with tape, but in this case, I think it's just adding another layer, and we're already fighting with how thick this feature is, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, very good. That's all in place. Now let's turn it right side up again. And it's hard for you to see, but I actually have the page 5 written here so I don't get my orientation wrong. And I covered it up on this side. So there we go. So we've got those features on the outside edges of page 4 and page 5. And like now I'm gonna take a break and get my papers lined up. We'll line this before we add our waterfall feature, and then we will figure something out to go into our pocket right here, and that's what's going to hold our waterfall feature in place. I'll be right back. Okay, I've lined up at least some of the papers that we're going to use for page 4 and page 5, and I think I've got them trimmed out. They may not all be inked. So I want to tell you something that I did that I kind of regret a little bit. And I know it frustrates you guys sometimes when I back up, but you can recover from it, but I think it would be easier if we had trimmed out a 1/2 inch piece to go on the top and the bottom of this interactive flap. As it is, there's a 1/4 inch on each side, so that means a very thin strip to cover. And I think without it, that's too much of a black border. So what I did was I trimmed this piece out for 8 inches tall. I laid it in, and then I figured out how much of a sliver I needed, trimmed this out, and then took another sliver off the bottom end. So you can do it, but like I've said before many times, once you get under a 1/4 inch or a 1/4 inch, it's really hard to manage those slivers. Now the good news was, the way I did this is I started with this full piece. And because I was handling the large piece, cutting off a 1/4 inch off either end was pretty easy to do. So it really depends on what you're doing. The other option that could be done here is there's this thin sticker. It's not the color I wanted, so I decided to go ahead and do the trim. But there's this sticker on the sticker sheet that will definitely work as a strip on the top and the bottom. Now the challenge is, there's not enough of this sticker for both pages. So you would come up with a second set of strips for the other page. You only get one sheet with a long sticker on it. And this is 5.5 inches, 5 3/8 inches wide. So you're not gonna be able to get 4 out of it. So you'll have to come up with a solution. If you haven't glued these down yet, that's an option. But like I said, if you trim this piece out to 5 3/8 by 8, and then lay it down, put your tick marks on either side, trim it off, lay this back down, put your tick marks, and then trim off this piece, you'll be okay. That's what I did. It's tedious, but I regret that I did not lay down a band on each end before I installed this mechanism. That would have been the easiest thing to do, and then the mechanism could have rested slightly over top of whatever your strip was. And it probably, for me, I probably would have just done a 1/2 inch and then laid this on top of it. Okay, so that is that. Sorry about that. But it is what it is. And this is also a pain in the neck to ink because it's so skinny. But I'm going to figure it out. And we're going to get these 4 pieces in, and then I still need to add our waterfalls and trim out the paper for the waterfalls. But I want to get this in as soon as possible because these are so thin, it's really easy to mistake it for just a piece of scrap that needs to go in the trash can. Okay, and it is so thin, I am going to go ahead and use a couple of tools to help me place it. Okay, now I'm going to do the other one. And because I trimmed them off the top and bottom of this, it's a continuous pattern. And I'm going to go ahead and do this one first, actually. Sink it and lay it down. Okay, now let's add this last strip. And I think it goes this way. Yes, it does. So the other option is to have made this entire thing a 1/2 inch taller. So right now it's 5.5 by 7.5. If you made it 5.5 by 8, it would go the full length of the page, and then you wouldn't have to worry about trying to mask this edge. So that is the other option. But if you decide to do that, it does affect the measurements of the internal mechanism as well. It is 5.5 by 8.5. You would have to make it 5.5 by 9. Okay, so it's a little bit tedious, but I think it turned out okay. I'm happy. I'm very happy with the look of it. It's just hard to lay down, so I'm not disappointed in how it looks. It's just challenging to work with, but you guys can do it. Take your time. It is it's a smidge under 1/4 inch is what it is, and that's a technical term, smidge. So this is going to lay down right here. And it is inked and ready to go. Every now and then I have these mild panic attacks that I have not hit the record button, because I've certainly been known to do that on occasion. Because I use my phone and it's hanging above my head, I can't see it. I have to stand up to see whether or not it's actually running. I keep saying at some point I'll get a more professional setup, but unfortunately all that takes time in terms of learning. And I'm always so pressed to get the next project out. I don't spend any time learning new techniques on how to record. And I know there's ways to mirror what's going on my phone onto a device in front of me, but I just, like I said, I just haven't had any time to spend on that. Something else always comes up. Okay, now remember, this is underneath this whole mechanism is a pocket. So I'm just going to set this in here so I don't forget. And we still have to add our waterfall feature, which I still think I'm going to do, but we'll see. Let's see, I'm making sure my strips are on the right ends, and they are. Let's go ahead and lay this down because it's ready. I've already dry fit it and inked the edges. We'll just lay it down so we're not fumbling around with it. I worry sometimes that I put it in the wrong pile and it gets repurposed. It's so pretty. I'm kind of going back and forth. I may not actually add a waterfall. May just put some stuff in the pocket. I don't know. I haven't decided. I'm going to go ahead and lay this down first, which is not what I did on the last one, but that's what I'm going to do here. It's really hard to see the edge. Black on black. I think I actually might need to trim this, so I'm going to use my white cardstock here so I can actually see the edge. See if I've got a nice border. It's close. It's close enough. I'm not going to trim it any further, so I'm going to ink it and lay it down as is. And I didn't check to make sure I've got the right orientation on everything, but yeah, I do. Okay, so it's going to go in like this. If you're building it in order, you wouldn't have to check the backside, but I build my albums out of order. A lot of times I either design the middle first or last, but it's very rare that I design page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That just doesn't happen. Partly because of the way I do my paper planning and the pattern distribution. So I do some jumping around to make sure that the patterns are well distributed through the album and it's not all front loaded or back loaded. Okay, now that is done, so we can add our little strips. And this goes on the bottom. It probably, most people probably wouldn't see the difference in the pattern, but you have an opportunity to do a continuous pattern, so why not? Why not? And like I said, this is a smidge under a 1/4 inch, so it is very thin. And that's why I'm not trying to put glue on the strip, but I'm going to put it on where it's going. It's just easier to manage, in my mind, anyway. Okay, I'm going to use my little tool here to help me press it into place. Okay, lovely, lovely. We're going to do that one more time on the top. Okay. That's way too much glue. That's just going to make a mess. Now, because it's so thin, the strip doesn't want to go in. It can warp on you. It's very easy to warp the paper, so I'm just trying to straighten it with my tool as best I can. Okay, that's in. Looking pretty good. That's a little bit bigger gap than I wanted, but I think I can live with it. I think it's dry anyway, whether I like it or not. Yeah. Okay. Get this closed. All right, and then we still have a pocket here. I'm gonna go ahead and put something in here so I don't forget that we need to do something here. So what I'm gonna do next is, I'm still hemming and hawing about adding the waterfall here. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do next is dress the inside of both of these, and then make a decision about whether or not I'm gonna do the waterfall, but I'll dress the inside first. So I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to go off and trim out those pieces. When I get back, we will decorate the inside of this feature. I'll be right back. Alrighty, we're ready to wrap up this feature. I've got my papers lined up to do the inside liner, and I just have them stacked inside. And we are going to, let's do the top flip first. And what you're going to need, and if you do it the way I'm doing it, is a total of 4 of each pattern, because I'm going to have both pages match, but you don't have to. But at least on this one, you'll need 2 of each pattern, and I am going to put my 2 solid ones in the middle, and then my decorative ones on the edge. You can alternate, you know, got a lot of freedom here. This is just how I like to do it. I think this is a very bold pattern, so when you do this, it gives your eye some relief because that's so bold, but I think this is actually even better to put those very bold patterns on the extreme edges to give you some visual space to appreciate it. So that's my thought process. And of course, if you use patterns that aren't as strong, then distancing them is not as significant. Alrighty. I inked these while I was offline, so you won't see me doing that right now. So we should be able to cruise right through these very quickly. Okay. And you'll see after you get all the papers on that why I went ahead and used that extra magnet, 3 instead of just 2. Because we're adding a lot of layers here. So in the case of page 5, I've got exactly the same patterns laid out. I gotta turn it over so I can better see my edges. It's a little too close to my score line on top, so I'm just gonna readjust it. Much better. Okay. And because I flipped it over, I wanna make sure I keep track of that and put this in the right orientation. Okay. Okay, there we go. So that is the top flip. So I'm just pressing this stuff into place a little better on the edges, the corners, and then we're going to look at the down side. Okay, now I'm doing the same thing where I'm putting my bold patterns on the edges and then my sort of monochromatic pattern right here in the middle. And again, I've already inked these, so they're going to go in quite quickly. So now if I was putting pictures in this book, what I would do is probably leave these bold patterns uncovered and then place my photos in the center. But you can obviously place a photo on top of this as well. But I think that's what I would do. Place my photos here and then leave these really strong images uncovered. Most of the time, the way my albums are designed, that would have been very pretty too. Most of the time I design the album so that the photos are actually on the inside, the B side of flaps, and the A side is just the decorative side. But in some cases, I leave room to do both. Having trouble talking today. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this around so I can get the last one in. Make it easier to see the edges. I don't think I got enough glue on there. There we go. Okay, so it should look like this when it's installed. So there's our top down, and then here's our bottom up. Okay, and then I'm still going to dress this as an insert. And again, I still haven't made up my mind about those waterfalls, but I'm leaning toward just keeping it simple, so there's nothing to bind in the middle of the book here. But I haven't decided. Okay, so I'm gonna repeat what we just did. It's the same designer paper. with the very strong patterns on the outside edges. I did it again where I didn't get enough glue. Okay. Better. Okay. That went in crooked, so I'm going to relay it. And I'm going to have to reapply my glue. If you do that, the key, probably if I move all this bulk from out of here, that'll be helpful. The key is to do it quickly because your cardstock is thirsty and it's not going to want to release the paper. Much better. I think moving all those mats from behind there was very helpful. Okay, now just making sure I've got my right orientation again. I'm going to turn it sideways so I can better see the edges. Go ahead and put a little glue around my magnet. Okay. Okay, now we're ready to go this direction. So I'm using my bone folder to push around the magnet to make sure that the glue is actually coming all the way around and grabbing the paper, because there's that little bit of a bubble, which is another reason why I like to use the tape. But honestly, because of all the buildup here, I was afraid to add just another layer and then the magnets wouldn't hold. I can see now that I probably put my magnets too close to the edge. You could have moved them down a little bit. I'm gonna manage, but there was really no reason to have it so close to the edge. I could have moved it up another quarter, half inch, and then I wouldn't be having so much trouble getting the paper around it. It's still working, but something to consider if you haven't put your mats in yet. Just sharing with you my current experience. I know it's frustrating for some of you guys when I don't have that already pre-planned, but every single book is different, and I'm actually building it for the first time with you. I don't build a rehearsal book and then build a tutorial book. I build it real time, so you're learning and scrapping alongside with me. And that comes with the good and bad, right? But I try to point these things out, so even if you don't get the benefit of that comment in this album, it's things to consider for future albums, especially anything that you design or build on your own. I'm actually surprised I didn't catch that sooner. But like I said, we're managing, but it would have just been easier if I had slipped the magnet down even just 1/8 of an inch. And it would have had zero impact on its functionality, and just made the paper easier to get down. I'm gooing myself up. I need to take a break after this and go wash the glue off. For the most part, if you just hold it down for a second over the magnet, it's going to stick. But because it is raised and it's so close to the edge, it's going to want to lift up. So just have to spend a moment, hold it down, and you'll be okay. I pressed this down so hard it doesn't want to let go now. There we go. Okay, so that is page 4 and 5. And I'm gonna go ahead and design my inserts, and then in a few minutes I'm gonna make that last decision as to whether or not we're gonna put waterfall features in. So right now I'm gonna take a break. When I come back, at the very least, these will be designed out as inserts. And the way I'm going to design it is I'm gonna put these on oversized mats so that when they're in the pocket, most of this card is still going to be exposed. I'm not even sure I'm going to use that card, but I will definitely use one of the larger cards, cut-aparts, I mean. So I'll be back in a few minutes, and when I come back, I'll show you what I've done with these 2 inserts. Okay, everyone, I have figured out what I'm going to put in my pockets here, and I'm going to finish telling you what's going on with my design process. So again, originally I was planning on putting a waterfall here and then using this insert to hold the waterfall in place. And I've decided against that for a couple of reasons. One, I really like the way this looks. And the second reason is because I didn't put a gusset in underneath this, I just used a flat panel and ran a bead of glue. The pocket is quite snug, given that it's glued down, and then also given that it's got all of this stuff going on top of it. So I can easily get this slid in, but if I was trying to slide this in over the top of 4 flaps, I think it would be very difficult to manage. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify the page, not put anything here, so you could easily put a photograph here. But we are going to use these inserts. And what I've decided to do is make these 7.5 by 6 3/4, 7.5 by 6 3/4. And then I'm going to also adhere a decorative cut apart on top of this that's going to be peeking out when it's all in place. So there. So if I had it to do over again, I do like the idea of the waterfall here. I would have made the bottom piece 8.5. Is that right? 8.5 by 5.5, and then or 8.5 by 6, and then I could have put a 1/2 inch gusset all the way around it, and it would have been a real pocket instead of just glued down. And when you make pockets that way, it gives you a little bit more room to put, you know, quite a bit in them. When they're glued flat down, and then also with this mechanism on top, there's not a lot of wiggle room to put much inside of it. Okay, so I'm going to add this feature here, so you still have plenty of room to journal. The back side you can also put photographs on. And I'm going to just mount this directly. I'm not going to put black cardstock behind it, which is what I normally would do. But because, again, that pocket is so tight, I don't want to add any bulk. That additional layer of bulk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it down here on the left-hand side, and I'm just looking for an even border of about a 1/2 inch. And I'm just eyeballing it. And that looks good to me. Glue that in place. Burnish, burnish, burnish. And then this is going to slip into the pocket. You have to be careful when you're slipping it into the pocket, because sometimes it just wants to slip behind one of these features. So make sure you're actually in the pocket. Okay, and there, that is what the look is. And I think that this yellow frame inside this floral frame looks really pretty. So that is what we're doing with page 5. We're gonna back up and do page 4 now. Same thing, 7.5 by 6 3/4. I've already inked the edge, so this is gonna go really quickly. Okay, now I have that, but I'm going to look and see if there's a different cut apart that I like better. So bear with me. There's only a few that are that size. Now I'm at the end of the project. I am very disorganized, so things are not at my fingertips like I like them. And I think I sure thought I had another one. I guess not. So this is my other option. This one. So I'm going to tuck it in. We're going to look at it and make a decision together. Okay. Kind of square that up so we get a nice visual. So that's going to go there. So this would be one option, and let's pull in page 5 so we can look at them side by side. So that's one option, and this is the other option, and definitely going to go with this. And the reason is there's so much green going on here and here. Adding more green just isn't doing anything for me. I like the red. If I had another blue frame, I'd probably do that. So let's get this inked up and lay down. Okay, same thing. I'm going to look for about a 1/2 inch border around 3 of the 4 sides. probably less than a 1/2 inch, but you get the idea. I just want it to be even on all 3 sides. Okay, that's gonna slide into the pocket like so, and I think that turned out really nicely. Back that off a little bit. Okay, that is page 4 and page 5, and we're done. That's it. I'm done. I might actually add some embellishment on this page, these pages, but I'm not going to do it in this video. You'll have to look for it in the walkthrough. But I'm really not sure I want to add any more here. I'm going to play around with a few things, so you might see something in the walkthrough that I don't cover as part of this build. But for now, we're going to call it done. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, being so patient. I know page 4 and 5 always take the longest, but that's because we're doing 2 side by side, so it does take a little bit longer. So thanks again for tuning in. This is Daphne from Scrap and Create. I'll be back soon.